My name is Evelyn Carter, and I turned 63 the morning my life was rewritten by the one person I thought I could trust. That day began like any other birthday I'd spent alone. I set the table for two, even though I knew better. Pancakes were Michael's favorite blueberry with too much syrup, and I told myself he might surprise me just this once. The smell of butter filled my small kitchen, and for a moment I let myself believe I was still the mother he used to run to with scraped knees and secrets. When the doorbell finally rang, my heart leapt like it hadn't in years. Michael stood there with a grocery store bouquet in his hand, the kind wrapped in plastic with half the petals already drooping. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, voice, stiff eyes darting everywhere but mine. I hugged him anyway, clinging to the idea that he had come because he loved me not out of duty. "Get dressed," he told me. I made reservations. I rushed upstairs, brushed my hair, slipped on my nicest coat. I wanted to look like someone worth celebrating. The drive out of town felt strange. No familiar turns toward the city, no sign of a restaurant ahead. Instead, the road narrowed, lined with bare trees. My stomach tightened when we slowed before a building I had only ever passed on cold autumn afternoons, Silver Maple Residence. The sign gleamed in fresh paint. The parking lot was nearly empty. Michael cut the engine. "What is this?" My voice cracked. "Mom, it's for the best," he said, clearing his throat as if he were delivering a business pitch. I shook my head. "No, not today." But then he stepped out, lifted the trunk, and there it was. My suitcase neatly packed, my life folded, without my consent. I stared at it, the cold air burning my lungs. That was the moment I understood the son I had loved unconditionally had brought me here not to celebrate but to erase me. On the day I turned 63, my birthday gift was 4 beige walls and a paper he'd already signed my freedom handed over with a flourish of his pen. The first night at Silver Maple felt colder than any winter I had known. The room they gave me was small, with walls the color of weak coffee and a single window that looked directly at a brick wall. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, my coat still buttoned, clutching the wilted bouquet Michael had pressed into my hands before he left. The petals were already browning a mirror of how unwanted I suddenly felt. A nurse stopped by, smiling too brightly as she called me sweetheart and clipped a plastic band around my wrist. When I asked for my phone, she shook her head gently. "Your son said it confuses you, ma'am. He's handling everything now." Her tone was polite, but the words hit like a door slamming shut. In that moment, I realized I was not here to be cared for. I was here to be contained. The hallway outside buzzed with the sounds of wheelchairs squeaking and televisions playing old reruns. My roommate, an older woman named Helen, barely stirred when I introduced myself. She mumbled something about her daughter not visiting in years and turned toward the wall. I lay awake that entire night staring at the ceiling, the smell of bleach stinging my nose. By the second day, I forced myself into the common room where residents sat slumped in front of a muted game show. A volunteer handed out crossword puzzles, and I pretended to focus on the squares, even though my mind wouldn't settle. I thought of every time I had said yes, when Michael asked for money, every excuse I had made for him, when he disappointed others, every chance I gave him to be better. My chest tightened with a question I could not silence. Had I raised a son who loved me, or had I raised a man who only saw me as an obstacle to clear away? I didn't cry that day. I sat quietly, pancakes and birthday candles still echoing in my mind, and made myself a promise. If I stayed silent, they would succeed in making me invisible, and I wasn't ready to disappear. On the 4th day, something shifted. Until then, I had drifted through Silver Maple like a ghost, eating little, speaking less, watching the hours bleed together under the buzz of fluorescent lights. But that morning, a different nurse walked into my room. She wasn't part of the regular rotation, I could tell by the way she glanced at the chart, then at me, as if she was sizing up the truth for herself. "Mrs. Carter?" she asked softly. Her name tag read Camille Rodriguez. Her braids were pinned neatly under her cap, but her eyes carried a warmth I hadn't felt since I'd arrived. I nodded, bracing for the same practiced cheer the others used. Instead, she leaned closer and lowered her voice. "You don't belong here." The words startled me. For a moment, I wondered if I had imagined them. "Excuse me." She smiled gently. "Don't get me wrong, some folks here need the help. But you don't seem lost." I blinked away the sting in my eyes. No one had spoken to me like that since the day Michael drove me through those gates. Something about her tone cracked the shell I'd been hiding inside. I found myself telling her pieces of the story, how my son had brought me here on my birthday, how he'd taken my phone, how quickly my world had narrowed to these 4 beige walls. Camille listened without interrupting her brow, furrowed her eyes steady on mine. When I finished, she rested a hand on the rail of my bed. "I believe you," she said simply. Later that afternoon, she returned carrying something folded in her palm. She looked around the hallway before slipping it into my hand. "This belonged to a resident who passed last week," she whispered. It was an old lottery ticket, creased and yellowed. I laughed bitterly. "And you think luck's gonna save me now?" Camille's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Sometimes the world owes us more than we realize." Her words lingered long after she left a small ember glowing in the shadows of my confinement. That night, long after the halls had quieted and the televisions in the common room buzzed into static, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the lottery ticket. The paper felt fragile between my fingers, as though it might crumble into dust before I could even check it. I told myself it was foolish, that nothing good could possibly come from a scrap of paper passed through so many hands. And yet, when the silence grew unbearable, I slipped into the lounge where an ancient desktop computer hummed softly under the fluorescent lights. My hands trembled as I typed in the numbers. I had to read the results 3 times before I believed them. Every digit lined up, the jackpot millions. My chest tightened, not with joy, but with something sharper, colder, fear. If Michael ever discovered this, he would finish what he started. He hadn't put me here out of concern. He had locked me away to strip me of my voice, my freedom, and now I held the one thing he could never forgive me for: control. I printed the confirmation quietly, folded it small, and slipped it inside my bra. Back in my room, I lay awake listening to Helen's restless breathing, clutching that piece of paper like it was oxygen. For the first time since arriving at Silver Maple, I felt the pulse of possibility. The next morning, I found Camille near the nurse's station. I tugged her gently aside. "I need help," I whispered, my voice hoarse with the weight of secrecy. She studied me, searching my face. "What kind of help? Someone legal, someone I can trust." She didn't hesitate. "There's a volunteer attorney who comes twice a month. His name's Daniel Harris. He helps with Will's power of attorney paperwork. I'll make sure he sees you." Hope stirred in me like the faint glow of sunrise. I wasn't free yet, but for the first time I had a plan. And if I could hold my nerve, Michael would never see me coming. Daniel Harris arrived on a Friday afternoon, a stack of folders under one arm and a coffee cup balanced in the other. He looked younger than I expected, mid-30s, clean-shaven, with the kind of quick eyes that didn't miss much. Most of the residents ignored him as he moved from room to room, but when he stepped into mine, Camille was already waiting, arms folded, like a silent guard. We sat in the tiny break room, the smell of reheated soup clinging to the walls. I slid the folded confirmation across the table with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Daniel opened it, scanned the numbers, then looked up at me. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He simply said, "We'll need to move fast." For the next hour, my life became a blur of instructions. He talked about blind trusts, temporary mailing addresses, notarizations, new identification. Words I barely understood but clung to because they were my only rope out of the pit Michael had pushed me into. Camille kept watch at the door, her presence steady, her faith in me stronger than my own. By evening, I had signed documents that stripped Michael of every legal tether he thought he had. My name was buried under layers of protection. The lottery winnings were shifted into accounts he would never trace. A new will was drafted, one that made it clear Michael Carter would inherit nothing. The night I left Silver Maple, the sky was just beginning to pale. Camille hugged me fiercely at the back door. "Don't forget us when you're free," she whispered. I couldn't speak. If I opened my mouth, I would crumble. I stepped into the dawn wearing clothes that weren't mine, carrying a canvas bag with only the essentials. To everyone inside, I was another frail woman fading into obscurity. But outside those gates, I was something else entirely. I was a ghost with millions and a reason to fight. The bus ride south felt endless. I sat near the back hood, pulled low, clutching the canvas bag against my chest as if it contained my very heartbeat. When we crossed into Tennessee, I pressed my forehead to the cold window and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Freedom didn't taste sweet. It tasted metallic, like blood and fear. The house Daniel had found through the trust was modest, a single-story brick home with chipped paint and a crooked mailbox. But it was mine, or at least hidden safely in my name. The first night, I lit a small lamp in the living room and listened to the silence. Not the hollow kind from Silver Maple filled with resigned sighs and muted televisions. This silence felt alive like a blanket wrapped around me. I tried to build routines. I cooked simple meals, sorted through the mail, took short walks down the cracked driveway. I checked the locks 3 times before bed. Every creak of the floorboards jolted me. Every knock on the door made my stomach clench. One afternoon, curiosity overcame fear. On a borrowed laptop, I created a new Facebook profile and searched for Michael. His face appeared instantly smiling in his profile picture, as if nothing had fractured between us. His latest post stopped me cold. "If anyone has seen my mother, Evelyn Carter, please contact me or the local police. She's been missing for several days. We're worried about her safety." Hundreds of comments poured in, neighbors offering prayers, old friends praising him as such a devoted son. I laughed, the sound jagged and bitter. They believed him. They saw him as a man grieving for his mother while I sat in hiding the villain in his story. But what truly broke me was the photo he used for his post. It wasn't recent. It was from 5 years ago, the last birthday we spent together. In it, I wore a sparkly party hat, and Michael had his arm around me, both of us smiling as if love were enough. How easy it is, I thought, to perform devotion in pictures. The quiet of that Tennessee house was both my refuge and my torment. I spent long evenings sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread across the worn surface, searching for answers I wasn't sure I wanted to find. Daniel had helped me recover a few old files tied to my late husband, Samuel. Among them were bank statements, loan documents, and tax forms I hadn't seen in years. At first, I flipped through them numbly, but then patterns began to surface. Signatures that looked like mine but weren't. Lines of ink too steady, too practice looping letters that mimicked my hand but carried none of my hesitation. One document showed a loan taken out 12 years ago, supposedly signed by both Samuel and me. Yet Samuel would never have hidden something like that, and I had no memory of signing it. My hands trembled as I pulled out more pages. Each one told the same story. Michael had been forging our names for years, siphoning money through loans draining accounts Samuel and I had built together. The arguments Samuel and I used to have late at night, the sudden financial strain I blamed on the market, the canceled trips I thought were sacrifices, they all pointed back to Michael. Then came the cruelest blow. Daniel uncovered IRS records tied to my Social Security number, returns filed under my name in the past 3 years, filled with inflated numbers, false deductions, phantom incomes. My own identity had been turned into a weapon wielded by the son I had raised and defended for decades. I pushed the papers away and pressed my fists to my eyes. Betrayal was no longer just emotional, it was criminal. Michael hadn't simply abandoned me at Silver Maple. He had caged me there to keep me silent while he finished dismantling the life Samuel and I built. That night, staring at the stack of evidence, I felt something inside me harden. I was no longer running. I was hunting. The courthouse in Harrisburg smelled faintly of dust and old paper, the kind of scent that clung to time itself. I walked through the heavy wooden doors in a navy coat buttoned to my chin, Samuel's watch tight around my wrist, a reminder of the man who once believed in me when no one else did. Each step of my heels echoed against the marble floor, steady and deliberate. Michael was already seated at the petitioner's table, his lawyer leaning close, whispering strategy. My son looked polished, well-groomed, the very image of concern. When his eyes met mine, he offered a small smile, practiced and cold, the kind meant for cameras. He was performing, and the audience was the court. The judge began reading aloud the petition Michael had filed that I was mentally impaired, unable to manage my own affairs, and at risk of manipulation. My stomach knotted as Michael's lawyer rose to speak, painting me as a fragile, confused woman who had wandered off, who didn't know reality from memory. They submitted recordings of old voicemails, moments when I was lonely or distraught, edited to sound like a descent into madness. When the judge finally turned to me, I stood. My legs shook, but my voice did not. Your Honor, my name is Evelyn Carter. I am 63 years old. I am not impaired. I am not lost. And I am no one's victim. I handed the clerk a folder containing Dr. Levine's psychiatric report signed dated, declaring me fully competent. Then another folder with receipts of my legal trust, notarized documents Daniel had prepared, records of my daily journal, evidence of a mind sharp enough to protect itself. Michael's mask slipped as I looked directly at him. He put me in a facility without my consent. He took my phone, my freedom, and now he wants my dignity. Don't let him. The courtroom fell into silence. The judge leaned back in his chair, tapping his thumb against the file. For the first time, Michael looked small, and for the first time, I felt tall. After the hearing adjourned, Daniel and I sat in the quiet of my small Tennessee living room, the folders of evidence spread across the coffee table like weapons waiting to be drawn. My hands hovered over them, the weight of each page pressing heavier than any stone. I had spent weeks gathering every scrap, every forged signature, every fraudulent return. The time for silence had passed. Send it, I told Daniel, my voice steady. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. The next morning, an anonymous packet was delivered to the Department of Justice. Inside years of deception tied to Michael Carter loans under Samuel's name, long after his death tax returns filed under mine, entire trails of embezzled funds. I imagined the investigators opening that envelope, the quiet shock that would ripple through their office. But I didn't stop there. Using the trust Daniel had built, I transferred $5 million to a national nonprofit that specialized in protecting seniors from financial abuse. No name attached, no credit, sought just a quiet strike against the very system Michael had exploited. Within days, the organization launched a new campaign, their ads echoing stories eerily close to mine. The timing stirred whispers online, a missing mother, a suspicious son, and an anonymous benefactor. Michael's carefully constructed image began to wobble. His social media posts, once filled with sympathy, started drawing questions. Why hasn't she spoken? Why is he so eager to control her money? The comments multiplied, eroding the mask he had polished so carefully. Then came a message I hadn't expected. A journalist from a major paper contacted Daniel asking if I would be willing to speak no names, no photos, just my voice. I hesitated, fear gnawing at me, but the truth was a tide rising too fast to hold back. If Michael wanted me erased, then I would make myself louder than he could ever silence. The article hit the newsstands 2 days later. The journalist kept her promise, no name, no photographs, but the story was unmistakably mine. A woman betrayed by her only son, hidden away in a facility, fighting to reclaim her life. Readers didn't need my name to feel the weight of it. The parallels with Michael's public campaign were too sharp to ignore. By evening, the speculation had begun. Commentators questioned how a devoted son could leave his mother missing for weeks, only to petition for her finances. Talk shows whispered about elder abuse, about the rise in fraudulent guardianships. For once, the world wasn't nodding along with Michael. They were doubting him. The pressure cracked faster than I anticipated. Within a week, federal investigators confirmed what Daniel and I already knew. Michael Carter was under review for financial fraud. His confident posture faltered in public appearances. Gone was the polished smile, replaced by tight lips and darting eyes. Watching it unfold, I realized I had a choice. I could remain hidden, letting whispers and documents dismantle him. Or I could step forward, claim my voice, and let the world see the face of the woman he had tried to erase. When the journalist called again, asking if I was ready to go on record, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said, but I want to tell it all. The studio lights were warm, the cameras unblinking. I wore a gray sweater, small silver earrings, nothing more. No mask, no costume. Across from me, the journalist leaned forward. Evelyn, why now? I looked straight into the lens. Because it's not just my story. It's every parent who gave everything and was discarded. It's every older adult silenced under the excuse of love. I refuse to be invisible anymore. When the interview aired, my phone buzzed for hours. Letters and emails poured in from across the country, strangers sharing their own betrayals, their own survival. I was no longer just Evelyn Carter. I was proof that silence could be broken. The indictment came quietly slipped into the morning news cycle between weather updates and sports highlights. Michael Carter charged with wire fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. I stared at the headline on my laptop, the steam from my tea curling upward like a fragile ribbon. No sirens, no dramatic arrests, just words on a screen that sealed the truth I had known for months. Michael posted bond, of course. Money could buy him time, but not peace. His business partners cut ties, his accounts froze, and even his wife filed for divorce. For all the years he had spent performing the role of the dutiful son, his stage had finally collapsed beneath him. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, what I felt was hollow. Victory against your own child is no victory at all. It is survival, and survival carries scars. One crisp winter morning, I returned to Silver Maple. The trees outside were bare, the parking lot nearly empty. Camille met me at the entrance, her eyes widening before she pulled me into a hug that spoke louder than any words. Inside, the halls looked brighter, the common room warmer. Donations had flowed in after my story aired, and I could see the changes everywhere. New bookshelves, fresh paint, a sense of dignity that hadn't been there before. They gathered in the activities room, residents and staff alike waiting for me to speak. I stood before them, my hands trembling just slightly. I'm not here because I won a battle I began. I'm here because I survived one. And I want you to know you are not forgotten, you are not a burden, and you are not finished. Applause rose soft at first, then stronger, filling the room with something close to hope. Weeks later, I signed the final documents establishing the Carter Foundation for Elder Justice, a promise that no one else would be silenced the way I had been. That night, I sat on my porch beneath the Tennessee stars, a quilt wrapped around my shoulders. I wrote a letter addressed to myself. Evelyn, you were never weak. You loved deeply. And when they tried to erase you, you wrote yourself back into existence. I folded the letter, placed it on the mantel, and smiled. For the first time in years, I felt free.